It's recognizing that leadership teams have taken on the commitment, the responsibility of building three really important things in an organization. And one of them is the business, which means creating value, driving growth and profitability, cash flow, all of the business dynamics that they have to make sure is working. That's number one. The second pillar is building a brand, the corporate, the entity, the employer brand. If it's a branded product, then the Nike of this world, or if it's an organizational. But basically, this corporation only exists because of the leadership team that decides to create something. So that thing, the brand, the company needs its own identity, its own reason for being, its own personality. So understanding that they have to choose and decide and build that brand. And then the third pillar that they're building is a team. So they have to know, how do you decide how to find the right people, who are the right people, make sure that you have the right people in the right seats, and building that team of people that are going to execute on your dreams.
All right. Welcome, fellow entrepreneurs and goal getters, to Entrepreneurial Elevation, Unleashing Greatness Within, with myself, your host, Kelly Beveridge, and my friend, Ron Szekely, who we've recently been introduced to each other, who's just an awesome guy. Excited to have him on the episode today. He's a wealth of information around business growth. He has got tons of experience, and I'm just going to share a little bit about him. So he's a former chief marketing officer. Now he's a business growth coach and purpose-driven optimist. I love that. He has over 25 years as a C-level leader experience in marketing for top brands such as L'Oreal, Rise Kombucha, Keurig. He's just got a ton of experience in building brands and teams to really leave an impact. And getting to know him, he totally comes from the right place. I love his story, which we're going to get into. And today, Ron's actually the founder of Boss 360, which is a unique methodology for business growth. It's actually what we're going to talk about today. I know that my audience is mostly entrepreneurs and people in business, and we could always use extra guidance and tips and resources for business growth. And he designed this specifically for entrepreneurs and founder-led businesses. So just super stoked to pick his brain. And so, Ron, just welcome to my podcast. Thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I'm super excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
And I should also mention that Ron chiming in today from Montreal. So I'm excited to have him here. Beautiful city. So, Ron, I just want to, first question, I'm going to dive right in. I'm just curious, because you worked with corporates for over 20 plus years. You had a great career. So what caused you to change gears and become an entrepreneur yourself, and then in turn support other entrepreneurs and founder-led businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's true. I spent the largest part of my career working with big kind of multinationals. Fresh out of school, I started with L'Oreal in their training program. So L'Oreal in the beauty business, and they teach you a lot and work you hard. And I stayed there for almost 20 years. So 4 years while I was in school, every summer working as an intern for them. And then I started right out of school, and I did another 14 or 15 years in various positions throughout there, always marketing and innovation. And then I worked for a few other multinational companies, Keurig, Coty, Sanofi. Had a lot of fun. I loved it, learned a lot, loved the sort of team dynamics, management, leadership elements. Being parts of leadership teams was great. But I would say the aha moment came for me when I was walking a food show where, I don't know if you've ever been to any of these food shows, but it's basically where everybody who's selling everything from kombuchas to snack bars, they buy a booth or rent a booth, and there's sometimes 7,000, 10,000 different people showing their stuff and hoping to get noticed by retailers, distributors, so that they can basically launch their business or get new customers. And so when I went to one of the shows in California, I saw some of big brands, so the Keurigs and the Pepsis of this world, who had their booths there, and behind their booths, beautiful people managing the booths. And they would just be there handing out the samples. But as they're handing out the sample, they're looking past you to the next person to hand out their sample. And then when I went next door to a founder-led business, they were selling snack bars, and behind the booth was the founder. Mm-hmm. And the look in their eyes when you would approach the booth, they were so excited to not just tell you about their product, and they could tell you everything about the ingredients and how it's made and why it's so amazing. And they would just watch you as you tasted it. They wanted to genuinely know, do you like it? And they would ask, what do you think? Is it too sweet? Is it too salty? Is it this? Is it that? And that sort of passion for the reaction of the consumer, the passion for the product, the brand that they were still just building, it was a lot more, let's say, heartfelt and genuine. And I realized the sort of energy and passion of that founder-led moment when you're launching businesses is so exciting. So as much as I had a lot of fun working in big multinationals with leadership teams and thinking about what's the next country or what's the next product launch, I had somehow forgotten that real grassroots passion of the entrepreneurial spirit and the struggles that they go through and the importance of every move that they make. And so I decided to start working with founder-led companies and help share some of the best practices that exist within companies like the L'Oreals and the Keurigs of this world that have been doing it in many countries for many years and have mastered, let's say, leadership and business building and brand building and generating profit and growth, and share some of those best practices with founders that are oftentimes just starting out without losing what makes the founder spirit and what makes them unique, without losing that, because I feel like they really have a competitive edge that some of the big multinationals lose sight of after a while. And so it's thinking, how can we celebrate what they have going on to help them win and ultimately fill the world with more brands and more products and more businesses, rather than fewer and fewer, bigger and bigger companies taking over every industry and every category. And so it fueled my passion for helping the right people do the right thing and share what I've learned and learn from them in the process. So long story, so that's the aha moment for me that made me say, I think I want to take everything I've learned and now learn from and share with some real inspiring people.
Oh my gosh. I love that. I love that you had that shift and you had that moment. And it's so true, right? When you actually meet the founders of the businesses who are getting it off the ground, there's this human connection piece that there where they really want to. I work with entrepreneurs all the time and genuinely wanting to service the customer from that, like you said, grassroots style space. And you have so much experience and so much wealth of knowledge that absolutely you can pass that down to entrepreneurs. We're going to talk about your framework, Boss 360. I know I was looking through it and I love it because you've really simplified what's important for business growth, yet they're all really important factors for entrepreneurs and founder-led businesses and brands. Maybe just touch on this. Let's shift gears to your framework because there's a lot we can share with the audience today. You got a lot that you can support with. Just maybe in 2 or 3 minutes, what is Boss 360? Just briefly explain in the framework and maybe the 3 pillars and the 3 intersections, and then we'll go through each one. And I've got some questions for you.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. So the idea was to create a framework so that when I work with leadership teams and their time is precious, and if they're going to take the leadership team offsite for a full day, how do we pack as much as possible into a day so that they not only learn things, but they actually get things done and they're moving forward? I look at a lot of the different systems that existed out there. There's EOS, there's Scaling Up, there's a whole bunch that have done a great job of taking, let's say, the best practices and the systems that already exist. There's great books that have been written. So how do you package all of that in a way that you can help people implement best practices? So that was the starting point. And then what we wanted to layer on was, is there a way of making it seem clear how it all fits together? So rather than just a bunch of great ideas, like how does this whole thing fit together? And that's what BOSS, so BOS, Business Operating System 360 does. 360 is the idea of the comprehensive approach. And so to your question about the basics of the 3 pillars, it's recognizing that leadership teams have taken on the commitment, the responsibility of building 3 really important things in an organization. And one of them is the business, which means creating value, driving growth and profitability, cash flow, all of the business dynamics that they have to make sure is working. That's number 1. The second pillar is building a brand, the corporate, the entity, the employer brand. If it's a branded product, then the Nike of this world, or if it's an organizational. But basically, this corporation only exists because of the leadership team that decides to create something. So that thing, the brand, the company needs its own identity, its own reason for being, its own personality. So understanding that they have to choose and decide and build that brand. And then the third pillar that they're building is a team. So they have to know, how do you decide how to find the right people, who are the right people, make sure that you have the right people in the right seats, and building that team of people that are going to execute on your dreams, internal people, employees, but also all of their partners. And so recognizing that this leadership team has to master building a business, building a brand, and building a team, and that it's marketing's job to build the brand or an agency. It's not finance to build the business, and it's not HR to build a team. It's really the leadership team has to see how these three things are connected and make sure that they can have a strategy to build those three all at once. And so those are the three pillars. And if you like, I could take you through how do we go about that and how do they intersect?
This really a 360 view like you shared, and that encompasses, mostly what is foundation for a healthy business. And so let's do this. So let's talk first about business, because I have a mentor and he always says, I love it. If you're not making money in your business, it's a hobby. It's not a business. And I myself have fallen in the trap of working so hard and putting things in place and having strategies and having plans and having a team and not making money. And so it is important to have the entirety of that business view. When it comes to business, I'm curious, and speaking like working so hard and not making money, what are 2 to 3 top common mistakes founder-led businesses and entrepreneurs make, preventing them from maximizing their profits? And then how do you suggest they address these?
Yeah, mostly it's about focus. So to have a business, and that's the beauty of capitalism. If you don't have something of value that people are willing to pay for, you don't have a business. So you have to be able to meet somebody's need in a way that others can't, and to be able to charge them more for it than it costs you to make. And so it's as simple as that. But oftentimes people are either not focused, and so they're trying to do a bunch of things in a kind of okay or mediocre way. But if they're not literally like the best at something, why should they exist? Why should anybody choose you over somebody else? And so it doesn't mean that you have to be the best restaurant in the world. But if you decide to be a vegan restaurant in Montreal, it's possible you could be, or a vegan pizzeria in Montreal, it's possible you could be that. If you're very precise about who do you want to serve and being deliberate about being the best for them and staying super focused on it, you can then, by being the best, charge more because there's nothing better. And by staying focused, you become better and better at it and make more and more money. I worked with a company that called Earth Rated. I don't know if you know them, but they have one product, or they did. Now they've launched a few more. But at the beginning, they basically made dog poop bags. So it was a company of a few people, and they were doing $70 million a year selling dog poop bags.
Wow.
And so they were like, it's not super glamorous, but it's focused, and they were the best at it, and they are the best at it. And so they made and still make so much money, but people love their products, and that allows them to fuel innovation and launch other products. And so it's this kind of focus and commitment to being really good at something, not just okay at a bunch of things, but being focused. And so for business, one of the things we start with is we call it the flywheel. I can talk about how we go through that, but I would say that's our starting point for making sure they understand what makes their business work.
Oh my gosh, I love that, because I think that's so important. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who they don't have the patience to get really great at things, because as an entrepreneur, usually we're creatives, we're looking for solutions, and we can get bored in the repetition of developing the skill to get really great at things and to be focused and to be disciplined and to be consistent. And I see certain entrepreneurs who are so gifted, yet they've never landed on making money because they don't stay focused long enough to become the best at whatever it is, and then add a second thing, and then add a third thing. And then, so I love that. That's what you're saying is one of the main things. Let's talk about the flywheel while we're in the business, and then we'll move to branding. So what do you mean you start with the flywheel? What is that?
Yeah, it's perfect that you talked about patience, and that it takes this sort of discipline, patience, consistency in order to get to a place where then business becomes easier and you start generating money. Flywheel is the concept, if you've read it, from Jim Collins' Good to Great. He did a second book afterwards, just specifically on the flywheel. But it's just really understanding the mechanisms of what makes your business work. And so one thing leads to the next, which leads to the next, which leads to the next. And if you understand those things, it spins itself. So I can give you some examples. So when I was at L'Oreal, for example, theirs was a kind of cash-driven flywheel. And so they would launch a product with a ton of advertising. And because of that, they were able to sell it, and they would keep a lot of cash aside. So they would make sure that they would keep 30% of all of their sales always put aside. And with that 30%, they would put 3% in innovation. So they would come up with a new product, a new mascara, a new lipstick, whatever. And they would keep 27% for advertising, money to be able to tell the story about this new product that they spent. And so it was as simple as long as we have 30%, no matter how much we sell, we got to keep 30%. If we invest that, we're going to have a new product and we're going to have a new story and it's going to drive sales again. And it just goes again and again. But they have to be super disciplined to say, we have to generate 30% consistently. And just because you're doing well, you can't reduce that. You just got to keep, even as you grow, spend more and more, and it just becomes easier and easier. And as you can imagine, as you keep doing this for many years, advertising becomes less expensive because you've got more economies of scale. Your innovation process becomes better and better. You've got all kinds of suppliers coming to you with ingredients and products and packages first so that you can be first to market. This disciplined approach of understanding this is a simple business. We just got to keep 30% and it's a real cash driven thing. Other businesses. So if I take, for example, when I was young, I used to do magic shows. That was like, I thought it was the funnest thing and I charged money and it was amazing. And I had a very simple flywheel and it was based on referral. So I wasn't the world's best magician, but I knew that all my job was, these kids were usually 5 or 10 years old. I had to keep them quiet for the birthday party because the parents were pulling their hair out trying to organize a room full of kids. And I would come in and I would have them sitting quiet for about 45 minutes. And I made the birthday person feel super special. They were always the one waving their magic wand and I would pick them for the tricks and they would blow on this. And so everybody in the room wanted to be the birthday person because they were treated like they got to do everything. And so the kids also had to stay quiet for 45 minutes. And so then I always booked a show at the very end of the birthday party. So they would say like, when should you do the show? I'd say like the last thing. And so these kids are quiet for 45 minutes. And then all of a sudden party's over. Mom and dad show up to pick up their kids. They haven't spoken. As soon as they get in the car, all they could talk about is the magic show because that's all they remember. It just happened and they haven't spoken for 45 minutes. So and Magic Ron did this and Magic Ron did that. And I want Magic Ron at my birthday party because they just saw that whoever was the birthday kid was treated super special. So they just wanted to be that person. And so I knew there would always be out of a room of 12 kids. There's going to be 1 or 2 that are having a birthday in the next couple of months. Phone rings, book the next one. And that was my mechanism. It was just make sure you get the referral. I didn't have to do any advertising. It wasn't a cash-driven flywheel like L'Oreal. My mechanism was make sure that when the kid leaves, they've got a balloon with a business card stuck inside and that they're excited to tell mom and dad about how amazing it was. And that if they ask the parents of the child, the parents would say, oh yeah, he was great. He kept the kids quiet. I didn't need him to say, oh, he did this trick and that trick. It was like, he kept the kids quiet. And so understanding that mechanism, the business kept going and going. I had 5, 6 shows week after week after week while I was in school. So it was a great way to pay for school. So that's like a referral driven flywheel. Mm-hmm. There's other flywheels, like a portfolio driven flywheel, where as you take on work, you're building your portfolio and that portfolio generates the next work. So that's a different one. But all that to say is helping people understand what is that simple business process and staying disciplined on that. So for me, not wasting my time on advertising, that's not part of my flywheel. For L'Oreal, making sure they've got that 30% to spend. So cash is king for them. So when people recognize like, why does your business work? Then there's usually 5 or 6 steps and you understand, is each of those steps working? And if not, you dig in to figure out, okay, what's breaking? And that discipline to just stick to that business model. And so that's the first thing that we do is like that clarity around like, why does this thing work and why does it keep working? And when it does, it gets easier and bigger over time by itself.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And thank you. Explain that. Magic Ron, you explain that so well. I love that. As you're speaking to, I'm like, what's the catalyst? What's the thing that's going to create the domino effect in your business? And then if it ain't broke, don't change. So then just keep using that and stick with it and grow it and use it as a strategy for business growth. And those are perfect examples. It makes so much sense to me.
You're still right about it. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And that's the problem that most people make. They get jealous. They see somebody else doing something. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh no, we need to do that. Oh, they're doing TikTok videos. We need to do that too. Or they're doing this and they keep changing their strategy. And if you have a mechanism that works, just make sure you keep doing it and it gets easier and you get better and better at that. When you start dabbling in all kinds of things in your marketing mix, you become like, you don't have the skill to be good at any of them. And that's probably the biggest mistake people make is they just keep changing their marketing mix, changing their strategy instead of just sticking to this like very simple mechanism that works for them. So they can become better and better at it over time.
I love this. I'm learning so much because I'm in this phase of my business. So that's not for me. I'm loving it. Okay. So speaking of marketing, because you're a branding and marketing expert, you've done this most of your life. And so I want to go to branding because for myself as well, and for once again, relating it to a lot of the people I coach, as they're beginning entrepreneurs or they're entrepreneurs wanting to break through to their first 100,000 mark or multiple six figures. It's this question of, what is my brand? Like, there's confusion around it. And so my first question is really simple. I would love to just hear from your experience. What is the definition or context of a brand in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, it's as simple as an expectation. So what is the expectation that you're trying to create in people's minds? If you have a product, there's three ways that you create that expectation. One is at face value, and that's how is your logo designed? What colors did you use? Was your business card look super expensive, or is it cheap and flimsy? There's a face value kind of brand impression that you can make through kind of design and graphics and all of that kind of thing. But that's not as important as two other parts. So the next part where your brand is built is through experience. So as a customer, you've used a product. How did it go? What was the experience you had? That's going to tell you what you should expect next time. And so that's your biggest brand impression that you could ever make, is that consumer interaction actually having with your product. So what expectation are we creating for the next time based on what you're living? And then that kind of leads to the next piece, which is that what are people saying about you? Because of your experience, what are you telling other people about that product? So people may have heard about it because their friend or a colleague or somebody told them something. So that's different than, and you can trick that with like promotional or advertising where you're telling stories, but it's really the stories that people are telling, which more and more, if they're not authentic stories, people don't trust them so much. Like an advertisement does as far as a personal referral does anymore, that's for sure. But it's those three things. It's what did I experience myself? What does it look like? And what are people saying about it? And so you have to you have to decide, what do you want people to say about you?
Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong. You just have to choose an identity and then help bring that to life.
Okay, I love that. Thanks for explaining it like that. So let's talk about that. So about what we want people to say about ourselves and our businesses. So how can founder-led and businesses and entrepreneurs define a brand that's authentic to themselves and their core values that actually deeply connects to their audience? Do you have tips on how to even start that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's recognizing that it's a choice and that it's not a choice made by agency or marketing team. Even it's the leadership team, the founders often, who do you want to be? And there's no right or wrong. And so you have to recognize that there's different, let's say, personalities that you can choose. If we go back to Jung, who had his 12 archetypes that are used, I don't know if you're familiar with the archetypes that are in every story. There's either the hero or the outlaw, or there's basically only kind of 12 personality profiles that can exist. And there's a playbook of how those people have to show up. So if you're Harley Davidson and you're an outlaw archetype, there's certain things that you have to do to keep that identity. If you want to be a hero brand, or if you want to be a caregiver, there's different things that you have to do for people to reinforce that personality that you decided to be. And again, for each of these 12, there's amazing brands that could be each of those 12 archetypes. There's no right or wrong, but you have to be consistent, because when you keep switching, people are like, who are they? They're just trying to be clever, but they're not themselves. And so you authentically have to decide which one of these fits right. So we do an exercise with the leadership team to help them figure out which of these archetypes feels like who we want to be. And it's not just who we want to be, but what version of themselves does their customer want to be when they use their product? So it doesn't mean that everybody that works at Harley Davidson is an outlaw, but they know that the person who's deciding to buy a Harley Davidson, when they're riding their Harley, they feel like an outlaw. And so they have to craft this brand image that an outlaw feels like, that's the brand for me. When I use this product, that's the version of myself that I'm identifying with in the moment. And so consumers might have one main kind of personality, but sometimes through brands, they bring other personalities to life. And those are the ones that you're trying to help identify archetype, or you're trying to pull up the consumer. So that's one part. And then there's a few more things that we help, very simple things that we do to help them align their brand promise and who they want to be.
I like that. First of all, decide who you want to be, because that's where the authenticity is going to come from. And people can see through it, right? When you're not being authentic as a brand, feel, right? That's probably a big mistake. People attempt to be someone else, or like how you shared, they attempt to look at what's the competition doing. and then I'll form my brand based on that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like the most authentic brands are the ones that actually carve out a space in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And I think more so now more so that's even more important. And then giving a space. My one friend, she does something called story branding, and it's about how the customer is the hero, not you, right? Like the customer is the hero. So I like as you're
Right.
speaking, like what's my archetype, and then how do I help my customer realize they're the hero in the story of my brand. So that really
Exactly.
resonates with me. What would you say? So when it comes to branding, what's your experience around maybe 2 or 3 brand strategies that really help drive business growth?
It helps drive growth, but I think more than growth, brand strategy, I would say, helps make things easier and simpler for everybody.
Mm.
So when you're working in a company, if your brand is not clear, you never know what to do. You never know, like, how much should I spend on this? I'm giving a gift at Christmas time. What's an appropriate gift? Like you don't have the playbook. So every decision that you make is always laborious because you don't have a clear framework of what are we trying to convey in every touch point that we have. What should an interview look like? When somebody answers the phone, how should they speak? Like all of those things can be very easily mapped out if you're crystal clear on who you want to be and how you want to show up at every touch point. And so first it makes life easier for everybody. And then by being more genuine, people come back. So you will attract, by being consistent, you're going to attract a very specific consumer who's, that's what I want. If I'm concerned about the environment and I see a brand like Patagonia that year after year, every initiative that they do is very clearly linked, that's what they believe in. And everything they've ever done has been that. I'm willing to pay more because I trust this brand. It generates probably not so much increased sales, but higher price points because people are willing to pay for something that they feel is genuine and authentic and that matching my needs. Reduces costs because you spend less time all over the place doing different things. So what you do, the synergy effect of doing consistent storytelling at every touch point has a way bigger impact. And then you can break through with certain groups that are like, I see myself in you. And so I'll choose you. So it's not so much the growth strategy, but more, it's a longer term play and simplification for everybody in the organization.
I really enjoy that. The branding is helping you have clarity for every decision in your business.
Exactly.
I love how you shared it like that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you. Before we move on to teams, is there anything else that you just want to touch on branding that you think would be important for people to hear or know?
Just reminding them that it's a choice. And so one of the exercises we do, we just go through a whole list of where you put things on two sides where obviously A or B could make sense. For example, do you want to be a brand that's inclusive or exclusive? And so there's lots of very great exclusive brands where you feel super special using it. It's not for everybody. I'm the only one who has access. There's a great place to be in exclusivity, but there's ultra inclusive brands as well where you feel like I'm part of the people. But you can't be both. You have to choose. Do you want this to feel like exclusive or inclusive? So they're both great, but you have to pick one or the other. You can't flip back and forth. Price, are you a premium brand or are you a value brand? So there's a whole bunch of attributes you can go through where people don't realize there's not one good answer. Some people might think that luxury brands are the best, but what is great for people who want luxury. One of the reasons Costco works super well is you go in, you feel like you're shopping in a warehouse. You literally are. Like the lights are bright, the carts are big. It doesn't feel luxury. They have expensive products, but it just feels like value because I'm shopping off of a pallet and I love it. Like my brand experience and impression of Costco is amazing. It's not Louis Vuitton. That's a completely different strategy, but they're both super strong brands that are reinforced at every single touch point. And there's no right or wrong, but they have to pick. Do you want to be A or do you want to be B? And that's probably one thing. Because when I worked at L'Oreal, we had about 45 different brands from Armani to Lancôme to L'Oreal to Maybelline. They each had their own territories. They were all selling very similar products. So you had no choice but to be like crystal clear about, is that an idea that makes sense for Maybelline or is that an idea that makes sense for L'Oreal? And it's the nuance of understanding the subtle differences between these 45 different brands and how to go to market for each of them made it fun to appreciate the difference in what are consumers expecting to feel when they use one brand versus the other. And so just that sort of decision tree that we go through with clients is very helpful. Asking the leadership team, are you here or are you here? And then we go through a list of about 12 different attributes. And then they've got a guidebook, a rule book of, okay, we've decided to be this. And then we say, okay, how does that show up in a whole bunch of different touch points, both internally and externally? And so that the people that work there live the brand and feel the brand. then the external consumer also gets that brand experience.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. We could talk about branding all day long. I'm sure there's so much that you can share on it. So for those that are listening, you're definitely going to have to follow up with Ron, right? You're sharing so much that I know people are going to want to know more about.
Hi, I'm Tanya, and this is Julie, and we are the founders of Coach Core, your all-in-one solution for building and scaling a successful coaching business.
At Coach Core, we provide you with everything you need in one place. You can house your courses, manage memberships, run email campaigns, and create stunning websites and funnels, all with our easy-to-use platform.
And it's not just about the software. We offer built-in coaching and mentorship, helping you implement best practices from certified NLP practitioners and story brand coaches. And that's just scratching the surface of what's inside.
And that's why we're excited to sponsor the Entrepreneurial Elevation podcast with Kelly Beveridge. Kelly is a thought leader who inspires and elevates entrepreneurs worldwide.
We believe in the power of community and continuous learning, and this podcast is a fantastic resource for any coach looking to truly grow their practice.
So join us on this journey. Tune into the Entrepreneurial Elevation podcast for insights and inspiration, and visit Coach Core to transform your coaching business today.
Coach Core, your path to coaching success.
But the end there, you touched on the people are going to have to live the brand within your team, right? Like that, going back to that, when you're clear on your brand, it makes the business decisions easier, which also makes it easier for the team to know what to be focusing on. And so let's go to your third pillar, which is teams. And so my question with teams is, what qualities do you consider essential in a team for entrepreneurs and founder-led businesses so that they can thrive? And then how do entrepreneurs cultivate leadership within those teams?
Perfect. So I'm going to back up if you don't mind, because I didn't cover the intersection points. And I think to understand the framework, it would be important when we talk about, so if you imagine those three pillars, we've got business, brand, and team. And so where the business and the brand come together, that's where we're going to find your strategy. So where are you going? How are you going to get there for the long term? Where your business and your team intersect, that's where we find all of the execution, setting priorities and our processes. And that's where we find all of the execution parts. And where your brand and your team come together, that's where we find your culture. And so your culture is, how does this brand, this decision you've chosen to have this kind of personality, identity, reason for being, how does that intersect with the people and the people that you decide to choose, which should fit perfectly in this organization. So they intersect to create culture with the brand, but they also intersect with the business objectives in order to drive execution. So they're building culture and shaping execution all at once. It's number one, making sure you have the right people for your organization, which is based on core values, which are not created. You have to look internally, what is our culture? What are the core values? The people that are successful here, if we could have nothing but people like them, what do they look like? Or what do they do? So it creates you a little bit of a playbook of what kind of people are we looking for. So you're hiring the right people that fit well with your organization, brand values, its core purpose, etc. So that's one important part. And then it's, how do you bring them to their full potential? So individually and collectively. And we work a lot we teach three things: lead, manage, coach, and helping people recognize the difference between leadership, management, and coaching. And sometimes it all gets mixed up, and they're either great leaders and they're always visionary and inspiring, talking about the future, where we're going, how we're going to get there together, how do you fit in. Great leaders, but then their managerial skills of holding people accountable and setting priorities and metrics and all of the stuff that goes into like actually managing and making sure they perform is a separate set of skills. And then coaching, which is a lot more kind of interpersonal, one-on-one, developing the employee, is a whole other set of skills. So making sure that every leader who has somebody reporting to them is good at each of those three things and helping them become better and better at that. And then to create what we call happy high performers. And we have a very simple, and I say we, by the way, because there's a few coaches that work with the same system that I created together with my colleague. And then we have other coaches that use it as well. So when I say we, it's because we use the same kind of Boss 360 system. And one of the things we do, we call it rave reviews. And it's a very simple one-page, both informal and formal process that we do with employees on a regular basis, where we walk through R for rocks, what are the big things they're working on? A for accountabilities, what are they accountable for? V for values, how well are they living our company's core values? And E for some specific expertise that they need to have in the role that they have. So it's a simple thing of about 15 lines, and we just check in like red, yellow, green, how are things going? but it's an opportunity to then focus on like, are there areas where you could be a little bit better? And ideally one or two. And if you find a few areas to improve, either to get up to speed, keep their job, or because you want them to get to the next level, become a manager or move up in your company, what are some of the one or two things we're going to focus on in the near term to get you there? And then once we've established that, so then we have to say, okay, for these one or two things, how are we going to get there? And it's not just read this book, watch this training. There's always a 70-30-10 approach. So 10% is, read a book, go to a seminar, absorb some information. That's 10%. 20% is coaching. So who is going to help you? Who's going to, let's say somebody has to work on communication. Who are you going to practice with before the big presentation? And who's going to debrief you after the presentation? It doesn't have to be your boss. It could be somebody who happens to be good at it within the company, or it could be somebody externally. But you need somebody that's going to actually, if your objective is to be better at communication, who's going to find those moments to give you feedback and push you along. And then the 70% is actually doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we, over the next little while, give you the opportunity to do that thing more and get better and better at it? And when you pair that with the coaching and the external training, etc., it's that 70-20-10 approach on a focused thing to get better at that allows employees quarter after quarter to always build the competency on one or two things without feeling overwhelmed with all these 12 things. It's just as a coaching manager to help them with a couple of things at a time, always get out of their comfort zone, get a little bit better at some things, create this culture of hunger for learning, but also willingness to help others in the organization master other certain skills. So if I'm great at communication, my boss says, oh, by the way, can you be their coach for, they're going to be presenting at the next town hall. Can you meet with them beforehand, have them practice, give them feedback, and then meet with them afterwards, give them feedback. And then I feel flattered to be helping my colleague and creating this culture of happy, high-performing people.
Yeah.
Not be mistaken with happiness because you get free cereal or a foosball table. Happy to become the best version of myself. So like a high-performing, happy culture, much better than just this sort of comfortable perks, happy culture that some people mistake. Try to replace like the opportunity to become the best version of themselves with a comfortable, like happy place. And that's not the right recipe for long-term success and fulfillment for an individual and in a company.
Oh my gosh, such great information you just shared. And I love the distinction, leadership, management, and coaching, blending all those, finding the right people for the roles. And I love the example of happy, high performers. As you're speaking, I'm just sitting here thinking, because that sounds amazing. Yet my question would be, what about for businesses that are just getting going? How do they attract top talent to fit those roles and criteria when they're new and they might not have the credibility yet, or they don't have the acumen to attract some top talent? Do you have one or two tips that you can give businesses that are just getting started so that they can still fill their talent shoes with great people, even though they don't have a thriving business yet to go off of?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally when people are getting started, they also don't have super deep pockets to compete with the big multinationals that might be able to write a big check for top talent. But what they do have often that a lot of other people don't is the sort of the story, the dream, the core purpose, the why. And if they can articulate that and give people the feeling like you're going to be part of building something meaningful, something important, and having an impact, that story, if they can tell it properly and if they can make it true, and if they're committed to helping employees develop and they're talking to the right people that fit in, they can attract way bigger talent than their pocketbook can afford at the onset. And like I mentioned, my aha moment of like lots of fun and success in multinationals, but when I saw it, the passion of the entrepreneurial spirit is very attractive. It's very seductive because you share their dream and you want to build something together, and you're going to be part of it because you're going to help shape the brand experience. And you're building those three pillars. I'm building a business, I'm building a brand, and I'm building a team together. So feeling like you're part of something at the onset and part of a vision that's been well articulated by the founder, that every business you can spin it in a reason, not just spin, but legitimately think of what value am I bringing to somebody's life? Like the example I gave you before of the dog poop bags, you could say that's just a plastic bag. But when you talk about the consumer experience of you have to stick your hand and pick it up, you want a bag that's not going to break, you want one that's good for the environment, you can create like, why is this important in people's lives? And then they realize, oh, we are doing something of value. And so if they can articulate it and help the person feel like they're going to be part of this, they can attract talent that otherwise would go somewhere else. And that's the talent you want. You don't want people that are just joining you because the check is bigger, because the moment somebody offers them a bigger check, they're going to leave. But you do have to pay them fairly over time. So eventually, hopefully things work and you're able to honor your commitment of paying them full value and an increasing full value. In other words, they become more valuable over time as well. We're not stuck in a small company doing the same thing for 10 years. We're going to grow together. This company is going to get bigger and you're going to take more and more responsibility. And that promise is probably the most helpful for recruiting talent. So they have to get good at sharing that vision in a compelling way and being honest about it.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy that. And then you'll find people whose values align, right? And they will want to connect to your vision and be a part of something, which most people look to be a part of something. I think that's awesome. So, okay, so let's move to the 3 intersections. And just for sake of time, we'll go through each one of these in a little bit more of a brief manner. Yet I think it's important we touch on them because it's the entirety of your Boss 360. The fourth thing would be considered, and the first intersection would be strategy, right? Where business intersects with brand. Can you speak to when building a growth strategy within a business, or what are the important points you want to make sure the audience hears so that there could be a solid foundation created?
Yeah. So there's 2 mistakes people make. One is they've got a strategy or a vision, but they haven't shared it. So it's in their head and they haven't taken the time with their leadership team to say, do we all have the same vision in our head? The other mistake they make, and this is probably even more common, they create a strategy, but it's this like 20-page document they do once and nobody ever looks at it and nobody ever remembers it. The beauty is that you can create a very concise, and for us, it's a 2-page strategy that everybody aligns on. So it's just taking the vision they've already got in their head, putting it on paper and making sure that they bring it out and we show them like, where does this intersect with all of their day-to-day so that it's not something that you do once and forget about. It's something that you have to bring to life on a daily basis. And so for us, we have a 2-pager. Page 1, we call it the 5W, and it's as simple as answering 5 questions: why, what, where, who, and way. And so your why is your core purpose, helping them understand like, why do we exist and why should anybody care? And if they can't articulate that, they probably shouldn't exist. If they can't say like, why am I doing this? Does anybody need me? What do I want to create? Crafting that why statement is so helpful for everything else that we start with. The what is really your core competence. What makes you unique? Earlier, I said a vegan pizzeria in Montreal. Those 3 things, we want to be the best vegan pizzeria in Montreal or whatever your uniqueness is. So you have to make sure that when you put those things together, you can be the best in the world at that specific, what you're building. The who is your core customer, not your customers, but your ideal customers, so that you're always minded, not just who am I going to target in terms of advertising, but more importantly, who am I designing for? Who is the person that is counting on me to create the best possible product or experience for them? And so being really clear about who that person is and not just defining it once, but bringing it to the table all of the time and thinking that we're working for that person. You're not working for the shareholders of the founder, you're working for that person. And so the more people know who that is and can concretely see them, feel them, and hear from them, like the experience of standing behind the trade show and the founder there listening to feedback, that's the part that makes the who so powerful, because you have much more fun working on a business when you remember that you're designing things for real people versus just numbers. So that's the who. We build that out together. The where is just a decision. Are we all aligned with, are we staying in Canada? Is it North America? Is it online or is it in retail? So where are people going to find us? So just making that clear. And then the way is 2 things. One is the flywheel. So does everybody understand our way, what makes our business work, and our core values? And so when you establish your core values, that's our uniqueness in terms of the way we work. So it's your why, your what, your who, your where, and your way, all on one page. So it's this one page we fill out together. It takes a full day, but we fill that out and that becomes guiding, and it doesn't change very often. That should stay pretty consistent over time. The second page changes, and that's our 10-3-1 So 10 years from now, where do we want to be? So it's just like one sentence. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's what are we working towards? And for some people, it's I want to be able to sell this company for $10 million. Or somebody else is I want to have the biggest restaurant in Montreal. Or for somebody else, I want to have the most followers of anybody with a podcast reaching entrepreneurs, whatever. They're like, what's my big goal? That like 10 years is a long time. So dream big. You don't have to figure out how to do it. Just know that we're working towards the same thing. So that's the 10. The 3 years, we get a lot more qualitative. It's almost like an image, a picture. And we ask everybody in the leadership team really articulate this. Where will you be 3 years from now? So some measurables like revenue and profit and number of employees and how many cities we'll be in, those kinds of things. But more importantly, let's describe it together. Are we working from this office building? What does it look like? Being as qualitative and descriptive as possible makes it feel real. So then you can manifest, and you all have this sort of same thing you're manifesting towards 3 years from now. And so that part is articulated quite a bit more with at least, let's say, 15 qualitative descriptors and about 3 or 4 key measurables like number of employees or revenue, et cetera. And then we do the 1 year. So the 1 year that's going to take us to that 3, what's the thing we're going to do in the next 12 months that brings us closer to that 3-year plan? And that's 5 or 6 big goals for the year. Some metrics like what's our revenue or growth or profit, those kinds of things. And then quarter. So the 10, 3, 1 Q, the Q is for the quarter. In this very next quarter, what are we going to do? What are our priorities to focus on that will allow us to achieve these big goals? So aligning on what are the big things? Because then we spend a lot of time making sure they stay focused on those big things. Until 10, 3, 1 Q is page 2, 5W is page 1. And with that 2-page document, their strategy, they've got a very simple alignment around where are we going and how are we going to get there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Brilliant. That is brilliant. Right? And just to simplify it, because once again, I think in business, sometimes it can just get so confusing asking ourselves these questions. And so to have frameworks that just really narrow it down and make it simple and allow us to put pen to paper and our mindset on paper and our plan on paper. I really love that, the 5 W's and then your second page of strategy. Because I was going to ask, how do you differentiate between like short-term strategy and long-term? So you answered my question. So, so I want to go into execution because you can spend that time creating the strategy. You could have the most brilliant strategy. Yet if you don't execute it, it's all for naught. And the execution in my mind really is where a big part of the success is absolutely going to come from. And so my question is, how do we support people, or do you have guidance on how to create what I would like to call like execution consistency? Because I would say one of the number one problems, adversities, issues I see in business is the consistency of the execution. There's such a start and stop and start and stop with implementing the strategy versus consistency in execution, where eventually you get that curve that starts to create the growth to go like that. What guidance do you have for people to implement the strategy and to stick to it?
One thing that's important is for people to understand the difference between strategy and execution and to make sure that they don't change strategy often. And so an example we'll use is, let's say your strategy, you want to lose weight. Let's say you want to lose 10 pounds. And so you come up with a strategy, your kind of game plan of what am I going to do, which might include, I'm going to eat 2,500 calories a day. I'm going to work out 3 times a week. That's my strategy. And now I've got to execute. So I've got to exercise 3 times a week and I've got to limit my calories. And so what often happens is people will start their diet plan. And after a week, they're going to see a video on keto diet. And they're like, oh, wait a second, that looks easy. That looks fun. And they're going to switch. I'm going to try a keto diet. And then that doesn't work after a couple of weeks. Oh, I see something intermittent fasting. I'm going to do that. And they just keep changing their strategy. And so they have no idea if their execution actually is working or not because they don't stick with it long enough. And so the truth is any of those diets would probably work. You just have to do it. And so you have to measure, don't get on the scale and check your weight. Ask yourselves, did I exercise 3 times a week? And so we implement a 5-star meeting, which I can go through after if we have time. But in that thing, we have a scoreboard of weekly metrics, but they're activity-based metrics. So we're not going to track in that if your objective was to lose weight. And you wouldn't track like how much do you weigh. We would track, did you exercise 3 times a week? And so we take discipline on focusing. Are you doing the things that you said you're going to do? And then after the quarter, we can evaluate, did that execution, did that strategy drive the results? But you can't evaluate your strategy unless you're executing on that strategy. And so people make the mistake of measuring sort of strategic metrics instead of measuring activity-based metrics that allow them to know if we can actually execute, we'll check in 3 months' time and we'll see if it's working. And I can guarantee you, if you exercise 3 times a week and you stick to the 2,500 calories, when we get back together in 90 days, you're going to step on the scale and say, that strategy works, let's do it again. Or maybe not. Okay, so let's reduce to 2,200 calories or exercise 4 times a week, but you can't optimize your strategy without execution. So we spend a lot of time making sure that they're very clear on what does execution look like. So they set their priorities and they put them in a scoreboard. And then every week we have a way that they check in on that as a leadership team, and they hold each other accountable to what they said they were going to do. So a ton of time holding each other accountable on execution and activity, and organizations spend so much time looking at other metrics that they can't actually impact. They can exercise 3 times a week. It's very difficult to affect weight in the short term. So you have to measure what you can control and then hold people. If they say, no, I only exercised once, if that accusation was, okay, let's talk about it. What's holding you back? What's getting in your way? How can we as a leadership team help you do what you need to do in order to execute as promised? And so I'm using the exercise objective, but of course it's other thing. I got to make 3 sales calls a day, or so help them execute on that and measure that. And by setting priorities, having good processes, and holding people accountable to those execution metrics can make a huge impact. And a big part of that is a sort of the right meeting structure, but that's a whole other.
No, I love what you just shared. That's crucial, because I just had such an aha moment as you were speaking, that most people will measure the result, which is important, yet they do it in a way to avoid the fact that, yes, yet are you tracking the strategy? And did you stick with the strategy? Because a lot of the time, it's not about the result. It's about the fact of the lack of attention to tracking your strategy and staying true to your strategy. And if you put your eyes on your strategy consistently, with discipline, with focus, with what's working, I always tell people, what's working with your strategy, what can improve, what's working, what can improve. And if you're not tracking, you won't ever actually be able to have anything to measure the what's working, what can improve. And once you do that long enough, then you will actually know if that strategy is going to be the effective one to get you the result based on results. So what you just shared is brilliant. And I think it's a massive, with at least a lot of the people I coach, it's a massive gap of where people can be getting better results. So I love that you shared that. Okay, we got to go to the last one and then start wrapping up. Culture. Sure. Speak to me about culture. So how does a company culture truly impact business growth, and how does it shape and sustain a business long term, really?
So when I'm working with leadership teams, I'm telling them they're in charge of creating the business that they want to be working in. And so they don't want to wake up a year or 3 or 10 years down the road and go like, how did I end up surrounded by these kinds of people that act this way? You have to be super intentional. And so you need to think about what is true, but also the best version of truth. What is it about myself that I really like, or about the people that I'm working with? What are the best qualities? Not aspirational qualities. I wish they were like this. The best qualities of the best people that are true, with real examples of when so-and-so did this, like that's an example of them living that core value. So really concrete, anchored in the truth, but the sort of the best versions of each other. And then making it very clear, that's the stuff that we want to see more of. And so if you are clear about what that looks like, then you have to bring those examples to the table all the time. So a sentence doesn't mean anything, but the examples of what does it mean to live that core value can be very impactful. Somebody might say, we want to be kind. Okay, great. But everybody wants to be kind. You have to say every week, I just want to give you one example of the kind of kindness that we provide. And so was feeling sick and they went out of their way, and a very concrete example of what could somebody do to live the core value that you're trying to. So they have to live it, but they also have to highlight those examples so that everybody else gets it. It's not just a sentence. This is my core value is something that might exist on the wall of many companies, but what does it mean here? And prove to me that people are doing it, because then I can say, oh yeah, I can do that too. And so making it really clear, what are your core values, and helping people emulate those core values. And if you just stay focused on those over time, the culture kind of stays there. So then when you're hiring, if you're clear on your core values, it'd be very obvious who's not going to fit in, because those core values are so clear for you. So you'll avoid bringing people in that completely disrupt that, because it'd be more obvious to you. But if that's not clear, you end up bringing in all kinds of people for the wrong reasons, and your culture shifts overnight, or you're rewarding the wrong things. You're saying be kind, but then you've got a reward mechanism where the person that's screwing their colleague get over for the leads or whatever is you have to, you can't reward the opposite behavior. You have to shout out and celebrate the right behavior so that you can be genuine.
I love it. Thank you so much. You know what, Ron, you're so great at explaining. You're so great at sharing and teaching and guiding. I love Boss 360. It really incorporate all of the values I have, and just good for you. I'm glad that you went to that food thing one day and had your aha moment and changed gears, because you really are making an impact, with all of the businesses that you come up, being able to help them implement this to grow their business and make a difference and feel good about what they do. Like, really grateful I met you. So I just want to wrap up with three last quick questions. But before I do, speaking of your Boss 360, I know that people who are listening are going to want to learn more. Like, we're just touching on things. So how can people get a hold of you? Where can they find more, discover more, connect with you? And then what else do you have on the go?
Great. So Boss 360, there is a website. So BOS360.ca, boss360.ca. They can go on there and there's a contact form. You can find me on LinkedIn. Please, if you're listening and you want to connect, I'd love to connect. Ron, R-O-N, last name Szekely, S-Z-E-K-E-L-Y. You'll see me there. I'd love to connect. What else have I got on the go? One interesting thing that I have on the go this month. So for the month of November, I've kicked off a challenge called Move for a Cause. So one of the things we wanted to do as coaches was we were asking ourselves, how do we put more movement in our day? Because we spend our day in full day sessions with teams and we're working hard. And we're like, we should be like getting outside, getting fresh air, getting active a little bit, because this lifestyle, we need a bit more activity. Mm-hmm. And we're like, and you know what? Probably the leadership teams need that as well. They need to move and get their heart pumping and whatnot. And they should be bringing that back to their companies and getting everybody to once in a while think about, how can I bring some movement into my day? Because we're all sitting on our screens or on our computers all day. So we're like, we got to walk the walk. We've got to show them, what does it mean to not be afraid in the middle of a meeting to say, let's get up and keep walking, keep talking while we walk. And so we now do that since November 1st. We could be meeting with a team of 10 people and we're like, okay, now it's time. It's 2:30, everybody up. We're going outside for a walk. We'll keep talking. And even sometimes we have people that are on virtual offsite in different locations. They're connected. They're walking on their own end. So we do these walk and talk meetings that we've committed to. And part of the reason we're doing it is part of Move for a Cause, which is there's an organization called Champions for Life that teaches physical literacy to kids. So kids that are not getting enough movement in school. They work in schools, in daycare, in kindergarten, in gym class, at recess, after school. They have these activities that they do that help kids learn to love activity, not just become good at sports, but learn competence, confidence, motivation to be healthy for a lifetime. That organization that I am part of, actually, I work with them a little bit. We're trying to raise awareness and funds for Move for a Cause. So that's what I've got going on. And if anybody wants to go to Move for a Cause, or if you find me on LinkedIn, you'll see a link there as well. Move for a Cause is raising funds during the month of November with a challenge of, can you be active for 30 days straight? And our challenge is 20 minutes of walking in our workday every day. And so you can pick your own challenge. It could be 5 push-ups a day. It could be whatever you want, but please partake in moveforacause.ca. It's for a good cause. It's for a great cause.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Definitely check that out. And you're definitely doing your part, and talk about creating culture, right? That's also a culture building. Great way to build culture is to do things together where it's outward focused and giving back within the community and to others. Also, I love that. Okay, so Ron, that's awesome. Everybody check out Ron. We'll put all the information in the show notes. So 3 final questions, 1 sentence answer type things. Ron doesn't know what they are. So first question, Ron, what would you say, well, you've had quite the career and up until now. So what would you say for you personally would be your definition of success today?
Inspiring entrepreneurs to pursue their dreams. For me personally, if I am able to do that, the amount of kind of courage and discipline and just hard work that it takes to get a business, to build a business, a brand, and a team, I have a ton of respect for them. And I believe the world gets better by people who create value. And we have the beauty of capitalism is if you're not creating value, you don't have a business. And so if you can succeed, it means you're helping somebody somehow. You're bringing value into their life. And so whatever your business is, if you can pursue it and be successful at it, I feel great about it. So for me, success is if I can do that by encouraging entrepreneurs to successfully pursue their dreams and build the brand and the team alongside, then that's my success for me.
I love that. Okay, so second question, what would be 3 tips you would give an entrepreneur or just anybody to unleash their inner greatness?
don't be afraid to decide. Don't try to be all things to all people. Whatever you have the intuition or your intuition is saying, I want to try this. You're right. Just do it. You can be successful at that thing. Don't be sidetracked by all of the other things that everybody else is doing. Stay focused on your dream. Number one, stay focused on your consumer. Number two, really understand them. Honestly understand them inside and out. What are their pain points, their triggers? Are you meeting their needs thoroughly? Don't be afraid to hear negative criticism. Seek it out and be inspired by your work is to help a real person. So know what that is and know how you're impacting their lives. Stay super close to them because people forget that they're actually working for people, and then they get caught up in their spreadsheets and everything, and they forget that at the end of the day, they're trying to create something for somebody. So do that. And then third, don't be afraid to fail. I know everybody says it, but you have to be comfortable with taking risks, getting outside of your comfort zone, trying something that nobody else did, and you're going to learn from it. And so if you are okay with failure, then won't be afraid to swing for the fences because you're like, okay, not everything I'm in is right, but that's going to teach you something or it's going to help you pivot in the right direction. And so failure will help shape the right path forward. And so don't be afraid of it. Welcome it in because that's going to now, because that didn't work, it wasn't supposed to work. Like you were looking at the wrong thing. You had the wrong idea. So good, accept that, take the learning, pivot, and accept those failures as life lessons that will allow you to keep working because you'll get it right and you're going to make a big impact. And like I said, you're going to build a business. So profitable, money, all of that. But you'd probably more fun is you're building a brand, you're building something that means something that wouldn't exist without you. And you're building and taking a great team along for the ride with you. So those three things are worth fighting for.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, and one last question before we chime out here. What would be a call to action you would share with the listeners that they could implement this week? What's one thing that they can hop off this episode, they're going to be inspired and go and do?
Commit to reading. There's so many amazing books. And to be honest, I only discovered that later in life. In my early days when I was busy in the multinational world, I wasn't reading a whole lot of business books. In the last 5 years, I've read probably 300 different business books. There's such a wealth of knowledge and perspective in them that if you did one thing, I would say, pick up go on Amazon and Google business books and what strikes your eyes, just read it. It's just going to add so much perspective that I wish I would have discovered earlier in my life.
I love it. Ron, thanks for being here. Thanks for creating Boss 360. It's brilliant. I learned so much from you today. You're just a great human. I wish you so much success, and you are inspiring other entrepreneurs to follow and live their dreams. You're in the right path and you're in purpose, and just thank you for that because I'm an entrepreneur and I learned a lot from you today. So thanks for being on the podcast.
Fantastic. And I definitely appreciate what you do. And I think it's a similar purpose of trying to pull out people's greatness and make the world better through entrepreneurship. So keep going. It's amazing.
Thanks, Ron.
And thanks for having me.
Awesome. Holy smokes. That was so valuable. For those who were listening to this episode who are entrepreneurs and business owners, I really hope that you got as much value from that episode as I did. I was sitting here taking notes. I was brainstorming in my own mind about my business as we were having this conversation. It just provoked so much insight and thought and questions within me in reflection. I really enjoyed that episode, Ron. Thank you so much. Boss 360, what a great framework to take what we all know is encompassing in business, yet to put it in a framework that really simplifies it and streamlines what it looks like to have a business and have a successful business, right? So your 3 pillars of business, making sure that it's profitable. You have a profitable business, branding, your team, and then where those intersect, right? When it comes to the strategy, the execution, and the culture. So much nuggets and wisdom and tips and guidance within the episode today. I hope that you enjoyed it. Go and check out Ron to learn more if that created a lot of curiosity and or if you want some support within your own organizations. And just thank you so much for listening. I love my community. And maybe just think as he was speaking when it comes to culture, I really do want to create a culture where I hope that these podcasts give you value, but not only value, resources for you, for solutions for what you're looking for, and benefit your business and benefit your lives in a big way. And so just thank you so much for showing up and listening. I really appreciate you. And I have so much gratitude for the community. So thank you for listening. With love, greatness, and success, it's your host, Kelly Beveridge.